chapter 2, we're going to start what's called solving equations. And so I've got a note sheet that you can print out that has the 6 steps for solving equations. And by the time we get to the end of chapter 3, 2.3, we'll be doing all 6 of these steps. But today we're really just looking at step 2 and step 4 and 5, and I'll explain that a little bit more later. But before we start these, I want to talk about the difference between an expression and an equation. I'm sorry about the shaking. I've tried everything to try to get this not to shake, and it's just this mount that I have that is causing it to shake. So I apologize for that. But an equation is something like we had in on the last test. This is an expression. All you can do is simplify it and make that a 2x plus 4. It doesn't have an equal sign, so you don't have to solve for x. But in chapter 2, we're going to be looking at equations, and you see in the word equation is the word equa, or meaning equal sign. So what an equation is something with an equal sign. It's like 2x plus 3 equals 5 or something. And so when you have an equation is when you need to solve for x. You need to get your x on one side and your number on the other side. When you have an expression, you don't have to do that. And so in chapter 2, we're going to be looking at equations. So let's look at this first one. So like I said on your note sheet, step 4 and step 5. So we're going to deal with fractions and decimals, not today, but we've got parentheses. Be aware of your equal sign. I'll talk about that later on. Move your letter to the left, number to the right, and then divide by the coefficient. So when you have an equation, you always want your letter on the left of the equal sign, and you'll end up with a number on the right. And so that's what we're working towards. Now with equations, there's always shortcuts and there's always different ways to do it. But if you're attending virtually, I want you to do it the way I'm teaching it with solving these 6 steps. If you really have an issue with that, just email me and you can kind of explain what you'd like to do different. But I don't want you using phone apps or anything like that to show the steps, because I'll know they're from a computer because they do them a completely different way. But if you'll practice these 6 steps, every single problem will be the same and it'll work out easily. And so you've got to be able to solve equations to move on from here. So it's best to learn them now. So let's look at this first one. So when you have an equation, you always want to be aware of your equal sign. Think of that as like the barrier or the wall. And you can move back and forth over that barrier, but when you go over the equal, I'll just write it here, whenever you go over the equal, you have to do the opposite. So that's kind of the rule to the game. You can move things over, but if you go over that little wall, you have to do the opposite. So we're also thinking that I want to get my letter on the left and my number on the right. And so if you notice, my letter's on the left, so that's really good. But I have a number on the left side of the equal and a number on the right side of the equal. So I need to move my number over to the right. And if I want to move this 5 over the equal sign, I can do that by the opposite. So the opposite of plus 5 is minus 5. So I'm just going to subtract 5 from both sides, which then cancels out that 5 and leaves me x equals, we do our sign rules. Remember, we never get to forget those. And so 8 minus 5 is 3. So our answer is x equals 3, because you want your letter on the left, the number on the right. This next one's the same way, just be aware of that equal sign. It's right here. This -4, I want to move it over the equal. I want to go to the other side, so I'm just going to do the opposite of subtract 4, which is add 4. And that's going to cancel that out, and x is going to equal 7 plus 4 is 11. This next one's kind of written a little bit out of order, but again, and you don't have to write this line, but you want to always be aware of where that equal sign is. My letter is on the left, but I have this number over here on the left, and I need to move it to the right. So when I go over the equal, I do the opposite, which cancels that out and leaves me x on this side. Here I'm going to say the signs are alike, add, and keep the same sign. So again, you'll be using those sign rules on every single problem. This next one, a lot of people miss this one. I've put it on the test before, and a lot of people miss it because they're like, oh wait, what's going on here? But we're going to think through. Here's my equals. but I have a letter on each side. So I need to move my letter to the left. And so when I do that, I'm going to minus an 8K, minus an 8K, which leaves me a K on this side of the equal, but everything cancels out on this side. So you always have a number on the right. So what's the number for nothing is 0. So if there's not a number left, then it's always going to be 0 there on the right side. This next one, now we've got a little bit more going on. Again, I want to be aware of my equal sign. It's right there. So I want to move my letters to the left and my numbers to the right. And it doesn't really matter the order, but just through all the years that I've taught this, that it looks less confusing if you always do letter left first and then number to the right. And so for this one, I've got numbers on both sides and I've got letters on both sides. But first, I'm going to move my letter to the left. So I'm going to minus a 12t, minus a 12t, which then leaves me a t plus 9 equals 7, because that cancels out, and 13 minus 12 is 1t. You can write a 1 there if you want to, but you don't have to. So I went letter to the left, and now I'm going to go number to the right. So since it's a plus 9, I'm going to minus 9. It's going to cancel out there and leave me t equals, the signs are different, subtract and take the sign of the larger. Okay, this next one, the biggest mistake people make on these is they want to start like adding 8, subtracting 4, adding 5, but you've got to be aware of your equal sign. So here is my equal sign. So anything on the same side is, you're going to be able to combine the like terms like a expression. So like I said with our steps, step 1 is get rid of fractions and decimals. We won't have any of those for the next few sections. Step 2, get rid of parentheses. We didn't have any of those. But step 3 says, be aware of your equal sign and simplify each side, or in other words, combine like terms. And I even have the sign rules there for people that have trouble with their sign rules. But this is an example of that. Here's my wall or my equal sign. These are on the same side, and so are these. So when they're on the same side, you don't do the opposite. You just combine them like we did on the last test. So here we'd say the signs are different, subtract, and take the sign of the larger, so that becomes a negative 4x. And here the signs are different, subtract, and take the sign of the larger. The equal comes down, and then over here I can't combine an x and a number, so I just bring that down. So in one step, we made it like this one we just did here before. And so now I'm going to move my letter to the left. Again, I'm going over the equal sign, so I do the opposite. And so that leaves me an x minus 2 equals 9. And then I move my number to the right. And when I go over the equal sign, I do the opposite. So x equals 11. Letter left, number right. Let's look at this next one. Again, first step is always to be aware of your equal sign. Here it is. I can't combine a letter and a number. I can't combine a letter and a number. So I'm going to go letter to the left. So this is a minus 7x, so I'm going to add a 7x to both sides, which leaves me x plus 3 equals 10. And then I need to move my number to the right, so I'm going to minus a 3, leaving me x equals 7. Okay, let's look at this next one. Now we've got parentheses, so we're going to be using the distributive property that we learned in 1.7. But again, first off, you want to be aware of your equal sign. It's all the way over here. So I'm going to go to my parentheses first. This one, there's nothing I can combine inside, so I go out front. There's not a number, so that's like a 1. This parentheses can't combine anything inside, go to the front, and this time I'm distributing a negative 1. Now when you distribute a positive 1, 1 times anything doesn't ever change, so this is just going to stay the same. You can really just drop off those parentheses. But a negative 1 is going to change all the signs. So here a negative 1 times 2x is a negative 2x, and a negative 1 times a positive 5 is a negative 5, because the signs are different, it's negative. And then bring down the negative 3. Now again, still be aware of the equal sign is all the way over here, so I can just combine the x's and combine the numbers like we did back in 1.7. So here I would say 3x minus 2x is x. And then a positive 2 and a negative 5, the signs are different. Subtract and take the sign of the larger, and then bring down the rest of the problem. So that was the step 3. So you see we're going through the steps. There wasn't any fractions. We got rid of parentheses. We were aware of our equal sign and combined like terms. And now we're going to move letter left, number right. So my letter is already on the left. So all I have to do for this one is move my number to the right. And here I end up with x equals, their signs are different, so we're going to subtract and just get a 0. Let's try one more. So again, step 1's fractions. We won't have any of those till the next section. But step 2 is to get rid of our parentheses. So we're going to distribute a 4. Whoops, let me do that in red. And we're going to distribute a negative 1 because there's not a number there, so we're going to write a 1. So I say 4 times k is 4k. 4 times a negative 6 is a negative 24. The signs are different, so it's negative. Negative 1 times 3k is a negative 3k. And negative 1 times a positive 2 is a negative 2, again, because the signs are different. And then you could always, you could just go ahead and, well, let's just bring it down. But you could go ahead and write 5 there if you wanted to. But step 2 was to get rid of the parentheses, so we did that. Step 3 is be aware of the equal sign and simplify each side, or in other words, combine like terms. So here's the equal sign. So do you see this 4k and this 3k are on the same side? So I can say 4 minus 3 is just a 1k. This negative 24 and this negative 2 are on the same side. So I say the signs are alike, add and keep the same sign. The equals comes down. And then these are on the same side, so I can combine them and just say 10 minus 5 is 5. Then step 4 is move the letter to the left. It's already there, so we don't have to worry about step 4. And then step 5 is move the number to the right. And again, I'm going over the equal sign, so I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to plus a 26, and get k equals 31. So the biggest mistake people make on these is like on one of these, they want to plus an, let me move it up. They want to do a plus 8x plus 8x, but you can only do the opposite if you're moving it over that equal sign. And that's why it's so important to be aware where this equal sign is. And you only do the opposite when you go over the equal sign. So you're ready to try the 2.1 practice problems.